Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we're talking with Ari Wegner, ACS, the Oscar-nominated DP of the film Power of the Dog. I say this every podcast, but this was one of my favorite conversations. Every week just gets better for me, and hopefully for you as well. We open up real heavy with some more philosophical film questions, but in this conversation, obviously, we do a deep dive on how she shot The Power of the Dog, her work with friend of the pod, Grant Major, the production designer, drawing similarities between other art forms, photography, of which she is a photographer, sculpture, all kinds of things. And really just, I really just enjoyed talking with her. It was a very sort of calming experience almost, and very edifying, and just really great. So I think you're going to love it. I'm going to let you get to it. Here's my conversation with Ari Wegner. As you have heard the podcast, we always start by asking the same question, which is kind of inquiring as to how you got your creative juices flowing. Not necessarily how you got into cinematography now, but where you kind of realized that you were more creative than perhaps working in an office.
Well, I don't know if you call it a head start or maybe something slightly inevitable about the fact that I grew up in a very creative family. My father's a visual artist and my mum's super creative as well. She did ceramics and jewelry, and so we had a lot of just art and aesthetic appreciation for aesthetics, light, kind of everything in growing up. But actually, cinema wasn't part of the kind of conversation so much, or at all, really. My parents were just not big cinephiles. And I don't know, maybe in many ways that was a good thing. I kind of, like I was saying a moment ago, the foundation that you're building in just color and shapes and composition and what feels good to look at. And maybe even how to just tell a story in different ways, whether that's a sculpture or a tapestry or a room. So that's kind of that was the very, very origin. And then in high school, actually kind of media class, I started to discover that cinema was, I guess, discover cinema more than just kind of movies or entertainment. It was an art that you could say things and make a statement or raise a question, but it wasn't just one thing to look at. It was a maybe 2-hour experience that you take someone on. And it can be and the power of how kind of it can suck you into the point where you might even forget that you even have a body while you're sitting on a couch or in cinema and there's people next to you, or everything else in your life can kind of disappear for a short period. Then you come back out of it and you still find yourself kind of re-experiencing it a few days later, or even a few years later. There's films I think about and some unexpected thought will come to you, or situation where your mind just goes back to a scene you've seen. Or that's kind of what I think got me excited, and kind of still does actually, the power of cinema. Such a unique experience. It's like a unique art form in that it's quite universal, but it's also really personal. And yeah, that feels infinite and infinitely playful and exciting.
Yeah. Do you find that it's hard, or maybe it wasn't hard for you because you seem to be naturally drawn to it, but I do find that when you speak of cinema, you're talking about sort of what maybe could colloquially be called like artistic broccoli. Mm-hmm. The movies that I find are most gratifying are ones that do challenge you to think, or maybe not even think, but go on, be emotionally vulnerable and let the story kind of put you on that roller coaster, even if it doesn't have any loops in it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's hard to get people to agree to, you know, a horror film seems to get people are willing. They're like, I know this, but if you, for instance, Zola, I remember Zola was the first movie I watched back from the pandemic in a theater, you know? Yeah. And I remember leaving that movie going like, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way that made me feel. Not the movie was bad, but like the emotions I felt leaving that. I was like, God, that was borderline depressing. Like it was really a gut punch of a film.
Yeah. Janixa, one of the most common words Janixa uses is stressful. And I think in the film, it's a stressful film. Stressful. Yeah.
Yeah. But point being, getting people to choose to be stressed out for a period of time, or like good time, I think is like a similar style of film. Or, you know, feel sad. Or do you find that was the same for you? Or do you have friends who maybe don't like to go on that journey that you have to like kind of wrestle with? I certainly do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that I love those films all the time. You need to, sometimes you want to watch something and you forget the world in a whole different way because it's just stupid. And it's, and then sometimes you're ready to do some thinking. And then also sometimes in an unexpected film that you read the synopsis and you think, oh, this will be a good escapist thing. And then some scene or something will make you think about something you haven't thought about in 10 years, or a person that or a situation you remember, or it's the thing with cinema. It's like unexpected. Unexpected. You don't know what you would often come to a film with an expectation of some kind.
Right.
It's quite rare that you'd sit down to watch something and say, I have literally no idea anything about this. I've just clicked, or I've just like someone's dragged me to something. Probably fairly rare. Most of the time you come in with an idea of what you expect it's going to be, or maybe you think whether you're going to like it, or you're skeptical, or you're like really amped about it. And that also plays into how much you enjoy it. It's complex.
Yeah. I mean, so we're kind of dancing around the question then, but where do you feel, I think everyone who's involved in the art probably has a similar answer, but what do you think the role of cinema is in today's world, especially? You know, things have changed so much over the past even 20 years.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think there's still like the power of a story in whatever way we tell it, whether it's cinema or verbally or in a novel. Like that's been with humans since, as long as we could manage to string a sentence together, maybe even before.
Yeah.
But like the power of one person to share an experience with another person is so, that hasn't lost any power, I think. If anything, it's more. It's like when there's so much information and so many things we're bombarded with, like what are the stories that cut through, and even like what's a story that can hold your attention for 2 hours? Like feels like now that's a big investment,
Yeah.
So what's the role that cinema has now? Big big question, but I think it has a role. And then I think it's also kind of changing in that cinema hasn't always been a very democratic art form. Sure. Most people can probably have the resources to draw or maybe even paint or write. But to make a film, it does often require a little bit more than that, at least a few more people. And I think the stories that we're starting to open up our scope of like what story is worth making a movie about, or what voices deserve to be heard. And if that's what we're talking about, then we've only just started to crack open the door of the stories, not just the stories, but like how to tell those stories. Cinema language is so versatile, and it's infinite. It's like infinitely infinite, maybe even more than the written word. It's like, I guess it's only really restrained to kind of a box, but maybe not even, that it's, I think we're really maybe only just starting to see what it could be. And like you said, it's a young art form. So I think it's got a lot, I think it's got plenty more to give.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. It's kind of interesting because in many ways it feels like, on one hand, it can feel like we've hit a plateau,
Mm-hmm.
where everyone, the audience and the creators are all so maybe not educated, because in many cases the audience might not be educated on what's actually happening, but film or television or this visual storytelling is so ingrained in most people's lives in some format that it maybe no, that's going to be too many thoughts at once. I'm a little scatterbrained. I don't know if you heard any of the other podcasts, but sometimes the thoughts jump around. But I fully agree. Like, now that you can do anything, the technology allows anyone to almost do anything. It's restricting that palette, so to speak, as you would visually, but now as an entire art form, to tell any story, if that makes any sense.
Maybe. It's like you've got to, I think if someone has a story they really want to tell, that also like rises to the surface somehow. Like a good story is just a good story. Like it just is. And then, how do you, if you've got a great story to tell, how do you tell it to kind of do it justice?
Yeah.
That's the real, how do you translate your story into cinema? Big questions. We're going big.
I know we opened up real hard. Well, going back a little bit, you were saying that your parents were creative and like sculptors and stuff. What did those sort of outside of film art forms kind of teach you about cinematography or filmmaking in general? Because I love learning with analogies, so this is great to hear.
I think it's very like osmosis kind of thing. Like if you're around a lot of, like paintings, within a painting, there's composition, there's lighting, there's a choice of color palette. There's how accurate or impressionistic you want it to be. There's complete abstraction. And there's what are the elements that you look at a picture and you really break it down. Like, what are the elements that give you the information that do tell a story about what's the atmosphere, what's the tone, or what are the thoughts what are the ideas that we project onto someone we see in an image, and what's the visual tension? Is it kind of, is there symmetry or something off about it? Where is it pushing to the extremes? And then where does it fit within the kind of ecosystem of history? And I think it's quite kind of, I would say mostly osmosis of what's pleasing to the eye, or kind of what, and then how do you visually, what does tell a story, and what's a picture, what's a piece of an artwork that like holds your attention, and why. I think that was highly kind of influential, though it's also kind of intangible to like
Totally
break apart. But other than just saying it, it's like a real appreciation for aesthetics and kind of all kinds of aesthetics. Maybe even also like not just appreciating, but like critiquing, kind of, and also that just like no one artwork is kind of good or bad, or no one critique or interpretation is kind of true or correct or better. It's it's your personal engagement with it. So yeah, even at a very young age, my folks would ask me like what I thought of it or why, or yeah, and without kind of correcting or anything, just that's a 6-year-old's interpretation of this,
Yeah.
master kind of, one of the like European masters, and that's just as valid as an interpretation as someone who's a academic in that. It's just completely personal. I'd say that's I've never thought about it in that particular way, but I think there's an element of that.
Yeah. For me, it was always music. And I think music tends to more readily be compared to film because there's like, maybe not acts, but, your chorus verse and all that, and the, peaks and valleys and stuff. But like seeing even a sculpture and seeing where, or a painting, where it sits within the confines of the art form and where it pushes it, I think can also inform certainly my photography. I've been buying a crap ton of photo books recently, and seeing where they are. One thing that's done for me actually is it's given me a sense of peace, because even looking at like Stephen Shore or Fred Herzog or any of these guys, Annie Leibovitz even, you can get kind of caught up in like, oh my God, it was perfect. And then you'll be flipping through these books, because you only get like a selection usually. And then you'll be flipping through these books and you're like, oh, that's kind of like a quote unquote normal photo, that seems accessible.
Yeah, for sure. But then there's also like some kind of consistency, something like both tangible and intangible. You'd be like, what makes a Stephen Shore photo? Right. What is it? It's no like one thing, but it's like it's a eye, and it's the totality. It's like the whole that make up that identity or that like voice. That's really fascinating as well.
Yeah,
like I heard elements.
Yeah, the like the whole kind of informs the individual pieces,
For sure.
versus the other way. I did hear that you were, or probably still are, a photographer, but you started early, yeah?
Yeah, I don't take as many photos as I feel guilty for not taking photos, actually. That's my own personal. I feel like I should take more photos now. As a teenager, I was like prolific and into film school even. I always had a camera with me, and that was kind of an obsession of mine. And I guess, that's what I'm doing all day on set. Maybe slightly less so between jobs, but the eye is still there, I guess. Like you're still, whether you're taking the photos or not, you're still looking at the world in quite a photographic way, or for me anyway, I'm looking at frames and shapes and light, especially light, like nonstop. So yeah, looking at the world in that way, I don't think that goes away. It's kind of you become very tuned to that, and maybe even unconsciously you see it.
Yeah. Were you a super like darkroom rat, or were you more involved in just like the photo taking? We're like, all right, it's developed. We got that. Okay, moving on. Back to the photo.
No. I was in the darkroom till the cleaners would come kick me out, Time to go home. We're locking up. Yeah, that was my high school years for sure. And there's also like a camaraderie of that as well that I think, what I think maybe I in some ways prefer about making cinema and being a cinematographer is it's a real collective experience. And I experienced some of that in high school in the kind of, and definitely in film school, with a bunch of people, we're all kind of doing something together. But yeah, in high school, it was like, a bunch of us in the dark room kind of working on our own thing. But then filmmaking is like another level of that. You're all working on a collective thing together.
Yeah, I was just doing an interview earlier today, and I just got off a short that I was working on over the weekend, it was the first set I'd been on in 2 years, whatever it's been, 2.5 years. And I had forgotten how, I said this in the other one, but I had forgotten how addictive that high pressure problem solving with other people became. And I was just the first AC on this one. But like it was a super small crew. So my buddy was the DP, and it ended up being me, my friend, the director, and like the grip and the gaffer. And we were all just like always huddled around the monitor. Like, what do we do next?
Yeah.
And the AD too. But yeah, it's a very addictive working environment when it's good.
Yes. Yeah. But there's something that really kind of clicks in humans, I think, in a small group working intensely on a singular problem. There's something deeply wired in us, I think, especially the small group, or like groups of small groups, or
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I understand that you and Jane Campion had been working on Power of the Dog for like a year before you shot it.
Yeah, that was a real treat, really, to have that time. I mean, I say a treat like it was given to me, but it was also a choice. It was given to me in that it was Jane's kind of idea to start so early. And I mean, that is the dream for a cinematographer, but it was also kind of my choice to really put everything else aside and not take on anything else in that year, that just to be ready. It felt like there was time, but there was also a lot to do. And it was when someone like Jane calls you, and I love her films, her entire body of work, and the idea that you might shoot the next one, a year doesn't feel like a long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
What was that pre-production process like then? Because I hear a lot of films, sometimes you only get 6 weeks, something like that, to have a full year. You must have really gotten into kind of like the really minutia and also macro, but just like have that opportunity to really dial down on what you were trying to do.
100%. Yeah, we were deep in every detail, and then the huge big decisions. And I guess it started off with location scouting, because it was important to us to be scouting in the time of year we would be shooting. That part of New Zealand changes completely. In winter, it's incredibly green, and then towards the end of summer, all that grass kind of dries slowly into brown, and then to this like incredibly crispy white, almost metallic silver kind of grass. So that to be scouting when we'll be shooting was super crucial.
Sure.
That was the first thing we did, and kind of settling. I think once you have a location, you can really start working. Until then, it can be a bit theoretical, and that's actually what the toughest thing is, I think, in that compacted pre-production. Often with those, say, 6 weeks, at the start of those 6 weeks, it's not guaranteed that the locations will be all locked off. So a lot of that time spent just driving around trying to find somewhere to shoot, and then the actual time you have to plan it might be only 3 weeks or 2 weeks, because you didn't have anything to start on. I mean, you can kind of start in theory, but really start the actual actionable, real, tangible decisions. The location really helps with that. So yeah, that was first step. Then we started talking about color and the color palette, how we could unify all these things like Montana, New Zealand, 2020, 1920, VFX, art department, costume, aging of everything needing to look aged, and this kind of visual minimalism that we were both really excited by, Jane and I, or a kind of elegance with kind of removing. This word that Jane would often mention would be unadorned. So, no extra bits, no hangers on, no icing, no decoration, no jewels hanging on that are just there to be pretty. Just get rid of it. And that
no
went down.
anamorphic flares.
Yeah, no anamorphic flares, no out of focus foreground, like nothing that's just there to be pretty. And not to say that beauty isn't important, definitely was, but not for prettiness sake. That wasn't exciting to us.
Sterile beauty, maybe. Beauty in a vacuum.
Beauty in like almost like imperfection as well. That even that landscape we chose, New Zealand's insanely beautiful. You can find Postcard New Zealand or Lord of the Rings New Zealand, and that was very much available to us. But the mountain range we chose, it's kind of got a ruggedness and a humbleness and an imperfection. It's got kind of repeating patterns, but not perfectly. It's got knobbly bits, and in many ways it's like a body, but like a real body, not like a stereotyped, beautiful body. It's like real, and that's what's so beautiful, because it's not picture postcard. It's not idealized. It's like real.
Right.
So that to us was what was beautiful or kind of exciting, and yeah, taking away rather than adding on. So yeah, we kind of started with the elements that we knew would be definitely going to be in the color palette. So we got the grass, kind of bright skies. We got the color of the leather and the saddles and the fur of animals, browns and blacks. We got like timber of the inside of the building and timber of the barn, dirt, dust. And that started to build a kind of core palette that just sort of we could keep any of the elements that we needed to bring in. If they could fit within that existing palette, then we're already well on our way to feeling that kind of unified elegance and minimalism that really excited us. And then in order for that to feel strong, the greens of that kind of lush place where Phil goes to swim, those two worlds kind of make both of them feel more strongly themselves. The dry feels drier, and the lush feels lusher because of the existence of the other. So that was the next big conversation. And I mean, we talked kind of throughout the whole year ad nauseum about the script and the scenes and what each scene needed to kind of do. And also those big questions like, how do you tell a story that the information is present, but doesn't, say, a certain piece of information that will later become be a kind of plot point. How do you have it present and not hidden, but not so clear that it kind of sends a big flag that this is going to be important. And
no true Chekhov's gun.
No. And no, but also not so hidden that no one can join the dots or you feel tricked.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of a big challenge. Like, how do we take an audience on a journey and have them land at this kind of gut punch of an ending that doesn't have one interpretation. It doesn't even have one feeling. It's like a lot of strong feelings that the characters are having, that you yourself are having as a viewer. And it's not confusion. It's like disbelief, relief, sadness, anxiety and relief at the same time. It's so many things you're feeling at the same time. That is what we wanted, hopefully, for people to feel at the end, or whatever the pie chart is of what you feel within those personally. and then to kind of make a film that we think about afterwards, a retrospective experience, so that maybe straight after or in the next hours, the next days, maybe even weeks later, you're kind of thinking back on something, reliving it, you're watching it in real time, and then kind of reliving it in your mind, and then maybe even have a desire to go back and watch again, and have a different, and that second viewing could be a different experience altogether. Yeah, that was some of the big conversations, and then I also went down some super deep rabbit holes to do with just the world of Montana in the 1920s. Like,
Sure.
it's a really fun world to be in, and I just wanted to know, just like tease out what are the elements, and also kind of trying to get beyond the surface into the real, and find real photographs from the time of people living their lives, so we can kind of, what are the elements that feel real, where are the things that are surprising within those real photos, so we're not just creating a kind of cliche or like something we know from history class, or a scene that we feel like we've seen in another movie, that each scene has an authenticity to the place and what's in it and the photography. And if that could feel authentic, then we would have a better chance of also feeling kind of with the characters. I think if we don't believe the world, then it's really hard to connect with the people in them.
Yeah.
Anything that makes you feel suspicious, you're already like a bit, you're looking, when you watch a film and something stands out as being like, oh, not real, or there's VFX that feel VFXy, you're already like looking for more. You almost want to, you're like, trust is kind of like broken a bit and shaken, and then you're always almost looking for like reinforcements of like whatever it is that twigged you, because the human eye is so attuned to things that aren't real. We're just really good at spotting things that aren't real. And
I've described it as when the head and the heart don't agree, you lose trust, and now you don't want to be on that aforementioned journey we were talking about.
Yeah. And so I guess on that note as well, VFX was a huge thing we discussed a lot as well, because there's a lot of VFX that are quite invisible.
Not quite, 100% invisible.
That was our big hope. Well, hope's even too airy. Like that was our conviction, that for this film to work, the VFX had to be invisible, because again, the last thing you want when someone's gone into that, portal to enter a world, is to be thinking like, oh, there's a VFX shot. Yeah. Especially
what were some of those replacements or like effects you were doing? Because again, I certainly didn't see it, and I don't think until like, who did the VFX? D negative?
Alt.
Oh, sorry. My bad. My bad if they're listening. But I remember seeing a breakdown and like of the like mountain range being replaced a little bit, probably to get the titular shadow going, and all that. And I was like, oh, duh, because in the theater, I actually got to see it over at Netflix before it came out, so I got to see it in the proper way, so to speak. And I remember going like, wow, they really found a mountain range where they kind of like figured that out.
Yeah. That was a big important one. Obviously, that had to work. And the dog is described in the book and in the screenplay. It's not described. It's described as a dog, but not in any specific way. So we had to really go all the way back to like, what does it look like? How big is it? How is it a silhouette? Is it a rock formation? Is it the top of a range, or what's it doing? That was a huge kind of journey as well, and really collaborative as well, which is great that Jane, she really fosters that. So myself, Grant Major, and Jay Hawkins, who's our VFX supervisor, and myself really all started kind of brainstorming again over a series of kind of months, really, of what the possibilities could be. And because it had to be something that was visible, but not visible to everyone, and not visible, but also that that people can look really, characters in the film stare very closely at it and still can't see it. So it can't be.
It can't be that bear head at Disneyland. For like, have you ever been to California Adventure? There's like this bear head. It's called like Grizzly Peak, and it looks exactly like a grizzly bear.
Exactly, like, duh. Yeah, you don't want to make the people that can't see it are not idiots. It's more like a magic eye kind of thing.
Totally.
So we actually, Jay and I on one of the scouts, and again Jane's kind of forethought of having a VFX supervisor come on all of our early location scouts and be part of all those conversations, not that, knowing that VFX is something that really happens in prep as much as it does in pre-production and in post-production. Yeah. And it was on one of the early scouts that Jay and I were up on a kind of hilltop of a mountain that is on another mountain range that looks onto that mountain range. And it was very late in the day in winter, because it must have been another scout because it wasn't summer. It's been like later additional scout we did, and these very long shadows, and we saw in the shadows like the face of a witch. And first we were kind of like, oh cool, witch's face, and then we're like, kind of dual brain explosion of like the dog. So yeah, that obviously ended up being a VFX shot, or kind of a manipulation, and then ultimately kind of they ended up doing actually quite a lot of work with that shot because it's kind of a series of focus pulls and
right,
and the idea of the kind of that effect you get when shadows, kind of clouds moving rapidly across the shadows of clouds kind of moving. So it's a really complex shot, and I'm so glad that it didn't call out as that in when you're watching it in the cinema. And then probably the top third of the house on the ranch house is
oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so that was something we designed the whole house, and then I think the real job of VFX, production design, DP, director is to basically figure out once you've designed the world, where are the seams, where are the joins, where are you going to stitch what you build onto what you build physically onto what you build digitally.
Right.
And that top third of the house was something that we collectively decided was it was basically more cost effective. And we also inadvertently chose one of the windiest valleys in the whole country, which is already a very windy country. So the amount of like internal reinforcement necessary probably whole thing would have had to be concrete. So
oh geez.
So we did that VFX. Then actually the cattle, we did kind of cattle. I wouldn't even say we shot a lot of cattle. We probably had maybe 200 cattle at most at any one time, which actually is not a lot, because cattle, they'd love to be close to each other, and you can't just say like, hey guys, everyone spread out a bit, just take
you need to look like more of you.
Yeah, take a little step to the side a bit, just spread out, put your arms out, like make some space. Like
Bessie, hit your mark.
Yeah, they're going to do what they're going to do, which is to be like close to each other. They're a pack. They're a prey animal which loves to hang out as close as possible to each other. So when they're moving, when they're walking, they do that.
Yeah.
There's a natural spacing that they find, and it's hard to manipulate. So 200 cattle is actually not. It seems like a lot, but on screen, especially in a huge landscape, it
sure.
And in the story, they probably should have had 1,000 or maybe even a couple of thousand that they're moving. So Yeah, Jay and his team did incredible work. It's you can see it in the breakdown if you Google these kind of cow replacements or additions. And again, incredible. I don't know where the seams are anymore. I just know that they're there. I can't see them anymore.
Trust me, I had absolutely no idea, and I'm usually pretty, as you were saying, I'm pretty good. Well, I'm a giant nerd too, so I'm always like, ah! But not only can't you see it, but it kind of really helps, or I shouldn't say helps, but it goes in line with what you were saying earlier about how the film is very much kind of like presented and not like guiding you to a conclusion or anything like that. And it's what maybe you could call, I'm making this up right now, but like a lean-in film where it's not like one of these like, yeah, this is, you have to go like, what? Hold on.
Yeah.
Moves that'll only work for the video viewers.
The invisibleness also, it's not just the shot itself, but it's the shots around it that also help you say believe, but when you feel like authenticity, and it is because it's in camera, and then there's one shot that's the VFX shot, and then it's the only VFX shot in the sequence, you're not on the lookout for it. You're a believer, and I really think sometimes with any kind of scene or something, but you've also got to give credit to the elements that go around it, and where you are as a viewer in the headspace, which is very much how I'm thinking when I'm building a shot, would be what someone just seen before, what's just before that, and definitely that the cattle sequences, we definitely planned the shots in a way that they had an order that they were designed to go in. And obviously it changes in the edit, but there was a logic when we shot it, and I think the spirit of that is still there in terms of it's planned in a way that the VFX shots, part of that is kind of where the VFX shots fall within a sequence is also important, I think.
Totally.
Yeah, the whole town of Beach where you meet Peter and Rose is all VFX, apart from the building, the red mill that we built one building. I guess going back, we designed the whole town as if you would build it for real with, timber, and found a site for it and designed geography and etc. And then you kind of run the maths and the logistics of how many days are we going to be here, how many daylight hours, how many nighttime shots, like how many shots have we got, and is it worth spending probably multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to build like 30 buildings,
right?
Or might it be better just to build one of them and build the rest in VFX? But because you've designed it already, you're planning the shots and you're framing on the day, and as you're planning, it's not something that you're kind of thinking, oh, later on we'll add buildings, but specifically what they look like, where they are, and how it all fits together. So I think that's a big key thing as well, that again, like the VFX happens in the planning, and the planning very much involves that production designer, because it's sets.
Yeah.
And myself and Jane and what else? There's a little bit of weather in there because we shot over summer. So
right.
Again, some kind of SFX snow, some VFX snow. And the planning is just, again, where the seams, where the edges are for the best result as well. For example, like the cows, you can't shoot like a completely digital cow is not going to look great right close to camera. So you're designing your shots with the real cows in the right spot of the frame, where we're going to, we're designing it in a way to give the VFX guys and girls the best chance of it being invisible from its design origin. what else? Yeah, the inside the house we tossed up green screen or blue screen out the windows.
Oh, okay.
But we ultimately decided on printing backdrops, which Jay took photos on location, and then we printed them in a very low-tech way. It's really just printed on like a billboard, you know.
Oh yeah, Grant was
Grant
saying you
mentioned,
guys couldn't get the like Vistalite or whatever it's called. The
the Translite was definitely
Translite.
out of budget. Yeah, that also takes it. It's a long and it's not a cheap process. And I read articles about DPs that use this magical Translite. I've yet to be on something where we've had the where it's made sense for us. But that was Grant's suggestion. He'd done it before, and it was again that collaboration is so key. Myself, Grant, Jay, Jane, and also the producers in many ways, because budget's part of it.
Yeah.
As to what will be the best result, what's the best use of our resources, how do we want it to look. And then you go into, well, what about when it's winter, and talking to Jay about, well, actually it would be better to still have the backdrops there and put weather onto them versus shooting it completely green or blue and building it from scratch. Also, because the nature of that inside of that house is so dark, but these beautiful reflective surfaces. So every surface that you see is reflecting something, because you're in studio, you're the one controlling what that reflection is. And if it's green screen or blue screen that's reflecting, then it's not a pleasant, you really want all that sheen to be the correct reflection. And when you've got those backdrops out there, that's the other bonus you get on all the skin and the set, is not going to get that pollution. And obviously there's ways to undo it later, but you're much better off to have it captured in a kind of clean way. And also something very satisfying about shooting a frame and it's shot, it's not, there's not a gaping hole in it that you hope someone will finish off later. It's not like a ... It's like, yeah, we got it, it's done. And yeah, I really enjoyed that solution that Grant kind of pushed for, and then we all really fell in love with it. And then also, having someone like Jay that took these fantastic high-res panoramas and into like and working with the art department to figure out the scale. There's a lot of maths involved as well, and in kind of and a lot of prayers and to the physics gods that we got our maths right, because when there's a lot of invisible VFX and a lot of invisible conversations and decisions that went into everything, or in every element that you see, really.
Yeah. Since you guys, you and Grant are the only two people I've interviewed who are here to talk about the same project, which I think is pretty cool.
Cool.
Talk to me a little bit more about how you worked with Grant, and also how that affected like lighting and sort of your compositions and all that, and what that back and forth was like for you.
I mean, Grant's just such an incredible collaborator and a real gentleman, as you experienced. And obviously, it's undeniable that between Grant and Jane, I'm definitely the younger of the bunch, and they come with all this wisdom of all the things they've worked on, and it's just a accumulation of thousands and thousands of more shots than I've probably done. And so that was also incredible to kind of work with and still be like kind of cross-pollinating ideas with someone that comes with that decades of experience, and then but also have them value your ideas just as much as theirs. And Jane also kind of it's not that any of those ideas will be better, they're just kind of different, or they're based on different experiences. So that was a incredible kind of experience to see. It was really fascinating to hear in Grant's podcast his background in architecture, which I wasn't quite aware of, but I can see it in the house. It's that is the work of an architect, and also to design a house that it's not designed to be lived in, it's designed to be shot by a camera. Its only purpose for existing is to be shot. So that as well is an incredible skill to know, and to work with me about, what's our aspect ratio, what lenses are we going to be shooting on, what are the angles we're imagining, and, so then how high do you make a door frame, the top of a door frame? How high do you make a ceiling that you want to have a high ceiling, but it still can't be too high that you'll never see it? What surface should the floorboards be and the walls be? What are the textures? How can we want something to feel dark, but needs to have a sheen in order to not just be a kind of matte black theater, black hole. Just infinite conversations that we really went down to the details with, and designing the house interior especially was really fantastic and collaborative experience. And that we really started with that scene where I think Grant might have mentioned actually, where Rose and Phil are dueling with the banjo and piano.
Yeah.
That kind of eye line down, and that kind of formed like the central core of the house.
That diagonal?
Yeah, the stair, like an eye line from the bedroom kind of down.
Mm-hmm.
And then, working with Grant to talk about windows and window dressings, and how much did we want to see outside the windows, what level of kind of feminine and masculine do we want with went to on all kinds of journeys to do with, do we have curtains? Do we have sheer curtains? Do we have blinds? Do we have, what are they? How much light do they block? What color is the light when it comes through the blinds? What does that say when you see it? What does a curtain say? What does a sheer lacy curtain say? And so, just incredibly collaborative process, but no leaf was kind of left unturned in terms of all the conversations. And also, that you can tell what a gentleman Grant is, and that trickles down through the whole department as well. So it's kind of having everyone on that team with just like an extreme kind of warmth and care about what they do and attention to detail. Jane in particular is incredibly attention to like detail oriented person. So everything is important to her, especially a great radar for what feels authentic or not. So, everything in the kitchen and every, piece of textile and wallpaper that Grant designed, that's a whole other podcast. Like just
sure.
The wallpapers they designed, and the, and then also just a great person to hang out with. These people are, essentially like your friendship group for the best part of a year, and you're sometimes driving and doing a 4 or 5 hour drive with these people. It really helps when they're just like great people to, spend time with, whether you're going to be talking about the film or something else completely.
Yeah. Do you, the film, to maybe the untrained eye or someone who isn't thinking about it, the film looks incredibly naturalistic, just like kind of where there's a character out in the wilderness. That's how the sun is. That's how it goes. Going back to the idea of Zola, also incredibly naturalistic, but maybe far more practicals. How did your approach to the cinematography differ between maybe those two films? And also, bonus question, how did you make those studio interiors match that same level of naturalism? Because a lot of those interiors look just like, I didn't know they were on studio until I think Grant told me.
That's a real compliment. I'm so glad.
And I have trouble either day for night or just matching interiors. I'm still struggling with that a little bit. So I could use the help.
I'll start with that one. So I was also super nervous actually coming into that, the idea of shooting on a stage so much of the film. Not that I didn't think that I could do it, but there's just such a high bar of authenticity in Jane's films. And if that started to fall apart, if for any moment we didn't believe we were really in Montana in the 1920s and just outside that window was the ranch that you've just come from, then the whole thing could, like that. As soon as you start to mistrust, then it starts to corrode at other things that are perfect, but there's a doubt there. So the stakes felt incredibly high to me that it was definitely my responsibility to pull that off. That's my job. We'd shot the exteriors in the South Island. We'd shot them already. That was the first part of the shoot. And then, so I had already spent, even pre-production, a lot of time down in that part of the world. And also, the 6 weeks or so we were there on that one property, mostly just watching the light and the intensity of it. Like it's really bright down there and windy and dusty. And so then when we came to the studio work, I guess I was just very much inspired by that. And then also, because in studio you're controlling everything, you do have the opportunity to make it perfect. But when something's perfect, it's often not authentic. At that point, you're probably in a commercial or photoshopped kind of something that feels like we're saying your eye knows when something's wrong, and that can be that it's too perfect. There's too much feel, or we can say everything a bit too clearly, or the lights just feel like falling a bit too beautifully, and we're in an insurance commercial or something. Nothing against insurance commercials. I do love a good insurance commercial.
They pay really well.
I actually really enjoy commercials as well. It's a whole other world. So whenever I felt that instinct, I would usually just kind of mess it up somehow. So whether that's put a mirror in somewhere and bounce create like the light kind of hitting somewhere unexpected, or change maybe the diffusion I had on the lights and make the foreground one and the background one mismatch, or just kind of even take a light and pan it a bit one way or the other till it didn't feel so perfect. And then I don't know if you noticed this, there are some things I just love to do in general, which is like hit light off the floor. Is a big old fave of mine. But I think that's often when you're in a room that the light's coming through a window, but it doesn't disappear, it goes somewhere. And if it's coming from, depending on how your windows are, but a lot of the light in the room is coming up off the floor because it's bouncing. That's what it does. So it is also a realistic kind of way of lighting. And then also some other little things I'm relentless on set. I'm just kind of, I always feel bad for the poor like standby props people and grip and electrics department by the end of the day, because just when they think the shot's done and they're like ready to maybe go get a coffee or something, or just step off set and take a breath, I'm never done. So stuff like making sure there's like dust in the air and or atmos, like haze in the air, to just because it was so dusty down the South Island. I mean, a lot of time it was so dusty and bright. A lot of the crew were wearing ski goggles, like to like get through the day. And so you don't, maybe you see it like a couple of times, you don't see it, but you feel it, it's there. And then making sure that those backgrounds as well were quite hot and exposed in a way, like you can see the windows behind you now, like they're not not quite that bright. You still want to see the detail, but just because I really in my lighting try and kind of like evoke a particular I guess like atmosphere, and that's maybe like a time of day and even like a temperature that it is. You know, you want to feel like these specific kind of temperatures that they are like an emotional memory to us, because it's like, one that comes to mind is like when I was little in Australia, and it was in summer, when you either towards the end of the year or the start of the year, because our Christmas is summer,
Right.
going to school, and it was like warm enough in the morning leaving for school, you already have a t-shirt on, and the weather and the wind's like quite warm, and later in the day it's going to get blazing hot, but right now it's like kind of pleasant, but it won't be for long. Like that, those kind of memories, or like the winter morning when it's still and it's really sunny, but it's really cold unless you stand in the sun. It's like cold in the shade, warm in the sun. Those kind of things, and like how to replicate that on a stage, and that's kind of like the color of light, the angle, the texture of it, and then the kind of how deep are the shadows and all that kind of fun stuff that you see in your day-to-day life and tap into, and then try and replicate. And
I'm definitely notorious for I have a little like Fujifilm X100, and I'm notorious, even myself, but I'm notorious for like anytime I see a good bit of light, I'm always like, stop, I gotta.
Yeah, I do that photo, and then I try and take photo of like what's making it. Like I've got so many videos on my phone that are like a beautiful shot of some beautiful light, and then it's like panned around and the camera's like readjusting, and it's like the sun hitting a building, hitting a thing.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of a capturing of what's making it, because that fascinates me as well. I can do that all day, try and figure out where a particular bit of light's coming from.
Great photos of dumpsters and alleyways. People are like, why are these on your phone? You're like, no, it's great light, I swear.
Don't delete that. That's important.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the first part of your question. Something about
it was actually how you approach naturalism in a film like Zola versus this one. Because they're both not reductively, but let's say huge air quotes unlit.
Yeah. I don't think, in many ways, my approach is not dissimilar. It's, if anything, it's like everything else in the films that's different. The lighting's not a world away. Zola's more of like a candy store kind of color palette.
Yeah.
The kind of dust bowl color palette of Power of the Dog. And obviously, the camera movement and definitely the action is completely different. But lighting wise, in many ways, not a world apart. Apart from, I guess, Sola's got obviously color, but I'd like to think that most stuff I shoot kind of lives in the world of naturalism. That's what I love to recreate, and I'm sure one day I'll do a film that maybe something like In Fabrics, like that's definitely gone outside of that world where there's like kind of artifice of like the cinema is kind of big in it.
Right.
We're not, but definitely in a kind of world of big kind of shadows and kind of
almost like noir type stuff.
yeah, giallo, kind of like bold lighting, deliberately kind of the lighting like deliberately accentuating something, whereas these two films were, I think naturalism was really important for them both, because like you said, in both those films it's really important that you believe that the characters are really in this place,
Right.
and that's very much, I feel like, my responsibility, that the actors are giving it their full naturalism, then the photography's got to match that.
Yeah. For Power of the Dog, were you then, to match kind of that sunlight you were thinking of, Are you primarily using like hard tungsten sources, or were you leaning on LEDs a bit? Because it seems to be a divisive topic for this this group.
I didn't have any I didn't have allegiances either way. We probably did quite a bit of HMI for the hard light on the stage, and then we mostly lit the backdrops with either X lights or if it was a dusk or a night scene, we used sky panels. So kind of like both. And then inside there was plenty of. We used mostly tungsten for the fire and lamp effects, but also tubes at times.
We love the tubes.
Love the tubes.
Everyone loves the tubes.
When in doubt,
tube it.
Tubes are great. Eye light is really important to me. I really feel like dark photography is so satisfying for me because you can really direct with a small amount of light. You can really direct where you want someone's eye to go. And again, not unlike those hills with the shadows kind of across them, this like craggy kind of landscape that is our faces. Darkness does like great things, but if there's as long as there's light in the eyes, and I would often use a tube if all else had failed and I couldn't get it with one of the key lights or the fill lights, that tube to the rescue. It's when an actor's giving like a beautiful performance, there's so much in the eyes, especially in a film like this where often the characters are not, more often than not, they're not saying what they're feeling. They're actively kind of masking it. But if you see in someone's eyes that it's just like kind of wetter than it would normally be, or there's like this emotion in the eyes, and if you've got the eye light, you can see that. And without the eye light, the frame's a bit lost. You're not sure even where to look. And you're also missing some of that beautiful performances. All kinds of fixtures really. And I do use mirrors a lot, or kind of different types of reflectors. And actually Grant, I don't know if you mentioned, but they made this beautiful had this beautiful glass made for all the windows. It's actually one of the only things that got put into the building in the South Island, and they brought it all back to the studio, to the windows and the window frames to put into the set. And it was this, like that old glass. It's like, it's a different way of making it. Yeah, it's a different way of making it than we make it now. It's I've forgotten. He told me all the beautiful details of how it was made, but they did a bunch of tests before to what extent did we want the glass to have visible distortion. And some of the rejects that were too strong, I actually used to create some of the lighting effects, and use them for some of the nighttime work with the moon kind of coming in, and either using them to bounce off, so just hitting into using it like a mirror almost, the glass. Sure. Or put a mirror behind it, or put black behind it, and just try different effects like that. So bouncing off those windows, or bouncing through them. But I love what you can do with mirrors, and I use those, the CRLS as well quite a bit. Yeah, I use them a lot. I love them.
I've been really interested in checking those out. I tried to get they have like an office out here, and I tried to talk to them, and we just talked about BB&S lighting, because I guess it's like the same company or something like that, or same guy sells them both or something.
Yeah, they're kind of like sister companies a bit, but they work particularly well when they work kind of with any light, but a really directional light you can use it in quite a specific way. But I use them as well to have the source be further away, to get a nicer drop off. So if you're in studio, and the sun should really be a very long way away,
right?
And you're in a confined space, so you can't take your light as far away as you would like to, but you can make the beam longer, and so the drop off is more gentle, less severe when it gets to your characters. And so that I use that as well quite a bit. And or just for fun, like I was saying, if something's feeling too perfect, some kind of piece of glass or mirror to either break up bounce it and send it off somewhere else in the room, or just even put a piece of warpy glass like in front of it. And again, the more I could do a whole other podcast on on light, soft light and hard light, and how kind of that works with the mirrors and glass and all that stuff. But
you shouldn't have said that, because that's something I'm terribly fascinated in.
Into it. It's the best. Yeah. That's kind of the most fun that I have on set and again it ends up looking like this. It can end up either it works on the first go, or it starts getting tricksy where you end up with like a flag forest or like forest of kind of stands, but then the results like really worth it. And I'm super content with some of the night interior work, because actually that's some of the hardest stuff to do, to like create a moon, or what's the motivation, and it kind of isn't. It's just like what your eyes can see in the night, and then maybe you make a moony effect, and it's always quite tricky. It's a tricky one because it is an artifice, but the way my thought process was if it can have a texture, then at least it's coming from outside the room and it can feel integrated and also really beautiful, especially on Grant's amazing wallpapers.
Yeah,
we used a lot of, I didn't even know what category you'd call the warpy glass. messing up of the light. Yeah.
Kind of on the other side of it, do you have any advice for anyone who's maybe not more stuck with, because that's reductive on who would be doing this, but any advice for anyone trying to shape natural light and make it not only more pleasing, but maybe more technically proficient for the camera and for not just backlighting people to craziness, but also to work quickly, because I assume people can get very grip heavy when they're trying to overly massage the sun.
Yeah, I'd say the first thing to do is to understand it, like understand contrast and light. And for example, you can do just as much with fill light as you could do with a big diffusion. If you have someone with a shadow that you don't love on their face, you can either diffuse the light that's hitting them, or you can fill in the shadows. It's a slightly different way of the effect won't be exactly the same, but it could be that the filling in might look more natural as well, because what you're trying to do is soften the contrast. So that's I guess like an example of understanding kind of what it is that you aren't liking about what you're doing, what you're seeing, and once you kind of understand light's traveling from the sun in a very straight line, and it's hitting someone, and what is it about it you don't like? Is it because it's that hard light is showing the imperfections? And why is it showing the imperfections? Because that's on that angle it accentuates the texture, because it's like micro shadows on the face or something. So you kind of, there's I guess a different solution for every problem based on what it is you're not liking. I'd say also like learning about the power of cheating angles, There's so much plenty of cheated angles in this film, that's for sure, where you learn to know what you can, I guess, get away with in terms of a background, and maybe turning someone 30 degrees, 90 degrees, suddenly they look great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sun is so huge. Really, I think the only way to fight it is with the sun. So whether that's bouncing and filling in the shadows, or like kind of with those reflected type of things, and also learning about how the size of a source affects the softness, and then as a result, the distance from the subject. So a piece of polyboard or reflector kind of board close to someone is going to be a lot softer because it's big, and then when you take it away, it gets harder because it's smaller because it's further away. Those kind of like concepts that once you start to understand them, then you can work with what you've got. It might not necessarily, and building the big thing it works sometimes, but there might be other ways to do it if you understand the concept, the big concepts, and that those concepts will serve you whether you're doing a day exterior or night interior or night any. That's the great thing about light. It's incredibly predictable.
Yeah.
It travels in a direction and it bounces off something. So, learning, plenty of videos back to high school physics that'll to get curious about, and there's a whole other level of enjoyment that comes from lighting when you can see that rather than just like I think probably as I did for many years, fumbling about hoping that you're going to
find it,
dance on the right solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a promotional photo that's been put out a lot of the main character sitting in the barn,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like a handful of diffusion kind of coming in to get. Yeah. Could you explain what that setup is? Because that's an easy thing for everyone to go look up and be like, "Here's what we're doing here."
Let me quickly find that because I actually have it kind of in my
perfect
email somewhere. I think probably what we were trying to do was like spread the light more inside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just opening it now. Okay, so we had a big light outside, and then with a series of frames, it looks like we were trying to kind of have the light wrap more into the room rather than being directional. So in the same way that when you like draw if you've got a thin white curtain and you draw it across a sunny window, your room kind of fills with soft light, and it like blooms everywhere, I guess. It spreads around. And so with what's great about having a door that's shaped like that, or a big kind of hole in a wall, is that you can, by moving the diffusion closer or further away, you can kind of control how much it's coming in, and it can still be soft, but also directional because it's getting cut. Like the doors there functioning like big cutters, kind of
literal barn doors.
Your literal barn doors. And then looks like we've got a sky panel in there that might have been doing some eye light or a fill, or probably, like I was saying, it's softening the shadows, softening the contrast just a little bit, and wrapping around further. Sometimes I look at photos that I did on set, and I'm like, what was I doing there at the time? What actually it is that because some of the time I operate, some of the time I don't, and I've been operating a bit less on the last couple of jobs. But I still find that I find it hard to light from anywhere but the camera, because they're saying it's like lights traveling in a each bit of photon, or I might be getting my terms wrong, but like a little particle of light is traveling in a direction, and in many ways the only place that's relevant for is from the angle of the camera.
Right.
So I can really only light by standing at the camera or on the angle of the camera, and seeing that other angle where I wasn't. My mind's like, what the heck? That makes no sense. But if you were to stand on the angle of the camera, you can see what each thing is doing, I guess.
Yeah. So were those frames kind of, were you like, did you have the initial light and you were moving those frames kind of looking maybe at the monitor and kind of going, all right, put that one in to get this here? Or was that a little more like structured as it went?
I think I'm on the camera there. Yeah. Can't even, okay. We're doing an over shoulder shot of Peter onto Phil. Yeah, I usually set the key light and then start to soften it from there.
Totally.
And I do like to bring in additional softening sometimes closer, because it'll wrap, like maybe that frame that's above Peter there may well have been to give Phil an eye light. Which I do that sometimes as well, bring a frame in closer for the eye light, without still keeping it on the right angle to keep a good amount of shape. But you're trying to give the eye something to reflect. Basically, that's what an eye light kind of is. So
totally.
Yeah. What a mess. So I look at that and I'm like, what was going on there?
But here's the thing, I'm sure that one of the reasons why they're using it as a promo still is because it looks like there's a lot of filmmaking happening.
There's a lot of stuff going on here for sure. Yeah, it all makes sense at the time. I mean, that's such a fun job, really, to have all these tools and people to execute a vision, and middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, I've kept you far longer than I should have. I really appreciate the extra time this has been a fantastic conversation. It's been really fun. If you would like to have the podcast about bounced hard and soft light, we can arrange that.
We'll put aside a day for that one.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I am here for it. But we like to end the podcast with the same two questions. I'm trying to figure out how to modify this first one because I've listened to other podcasts now and I realize we all have the same last two fucking questions. So I can't be doing that. But for now, what is maybe something you've read or maybe a piece of advice that you were given that stuck with you over this, or maybe recently kind of gave you an aha moment?
That's a curly one. I mean, there's some I kind of give myself maybe, and I don't know if I've learned it from anyone or just me, but it's like just that relationships are so important, and that kind of is part of that's like communication, but relationships all round, whether that's your relationship with the director and the relationships with the people you're working with, and even the people that you leave at home. It's all part of your it really influences the work. It's not separate. And I guess communication is, a really key part of that. But for me, kind of valuing kind of maybe even the relationships over the work. If there's any time where I kind of feel, a director has one idea and I have another idea, and I think my idea is superior and they think their idea is superior. For me, there's no like battle worth having, because it's like the relationship is so much more important than this one decision.
Right.
So, it's really kind of huge, and it kind of is the good work also comes from that. It's not a compromise, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's a very roundabout way of saying it, and I don't know if that's even advice I read or have just come to, but I'm sure there's plenty of people that have written on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't remember who said it. It might have been Dave Grohl or someone, but it basically, like, you don't have to be angry and sad to make metal. You know, like, happy people make angry music all the time. It doesn't need to. If anything, when you're more clear-headed and your emotion and your relationships around you are healthy, you're able to go into those places and find those emotions and articulate them in a more healthy way, but also a more accurate way, I suppose. Yeah,
totally. That's great. I would 100% agree with that. I think as well the idea of this, like, tortured artist is there's probably a romance to it, but it's not really a great way to live.
Like, you'll burn out.
I wouldn't recommend it. You should probably work on whatever's torturing you. Maybe your art could be even better. Don't.
Second question. Power of the Dog is going to be in a double feature. What's the other film?
Oof. Actually, I'm hoping to program it in a double feature in Melbourne later in the year.
Hell yeah, preview.
Hoping my request gets approved to put it with A Man Escaped, the Bresson film, which Jane and I both really love. That it was kind of our bar for minimalism, and maybe it's even a little more minimal than our film, but just the power and the tension you can create when you're really mindful about the shots, sound, the elements, and the attention to detail, and, you know, power of a macro shot and the power of a face. And there's this, like, incredible tension in that film that, and you break down the elements, it's like so few. The way that sound and images obviously also work together. Hopefully that will be my double bill. That's a great question. I would love to see actually the film that, you know, probably the only film we watched really and kind of looked to as a bar to hit. I would love to see, you know, them back to back.
Yeah, well, hopefully you get to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, thanks again for spending the extra time with me. That was fantastic.
Wonderful. Lovely to meet you. And
you too.
Thanks for your podcast. I really enjoy it in general.
Oh.
I'm a big podcast listener.
That's great to hear. Yeah, this first season seemed to be I was invisible, and now it seems more people have found it. So that's good to hear.
Great.
Awesome. Well, like I said, it was great talking to you, and hopefully we can have you back soon.
Love to. Thanks so much.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Mattbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.